Key points we want to hit on, though, before we get into the program design itself. This was a year-long pilot that we concluded in October. This pilot served both adults and youth, and no one has been arrested in Denver in conjunction with this pilot.
Okay, so we get it, and it goes into an RFP that's managed by the Department of Justice. So we had no idea who the vendors were, what the final cost was. They told us, we'd like your program, and they matched us with Idea Analytics, which is a small data analytic firm out of Phoenix. So not only was it limited in terms of had to be constitutional, but there's further internal constraints on the data we can keep because of an agreement we had in the early 2000s with the ACLU that stemmed from a scandal called the spy files. So we can't keep police intelligence based upon group involvement. So it had to be a very, very limited pool of data we could pull from, which ended up only being DPD criminal justice records. So that's the origin of the model.
We only contacted 30 because we were not able to find the other 21, and 9 accepted and received services. So 222 to 9 receiving services. Pilot findings, here are the things that we learned over the last year. One is the model that Kristen just ran us through was incredibly resource intensive for her team. And so the model would then give a score, and then from that, they were doing an average of 2 hours of work on that workup per individual. So 2 times 222 folks, right? Very resource intensive. That 51 to 30 folks contacted, it's really hard to find these individuals, right? And so while we did have folks that we wanted to offer services to, we had about a 60% hit rate of even being able to find those folks. One of the things that I don't think we necessarily understood at the beginning that we've definitely received a lot of feedback on since the conclusion of this pilot is the reputational risk ONS's programs have felt having 2 programs kind of concurrently run at once. One that has law enforcement involvement and another one that doesn't. And so that's something we've deeply had to take into consideration, especially in the last couple of months. We don't believe this version of the program has had any significant impact on our drop-in shootings, just given the small number of folks that we came into contact with. And we actually have no data to evaluate this program's effect on sentencing because we have had nobody sentenced through this program. The next steps that we have here, it was a year-long pilot that we concluded in October. The program has been wound down, gang meetings are no longer happening. We completed an after-action review with the internal peak team to the city to figure out what we thought were strengths and weaknesses of this program. And we do intend in 2026 to think about a redesign of this because we think it's an important strategy towards gun violence reduction, and we'll try to take the learnings from what we have found in these findings forward into that. With that, that's our presentation.
I wanted to start by stating the GAIN program, at least for my edification and my knowledge, came to my understanding from a group of young people from communities speaking at public comment. And as I'm speaking to Channel 8, the power and importance of young people or all folks that are seeing or feeling the need to elevate their voices. Our public comment process every Monday night provides that, and that is how I became uniquely aware of this. And that's kind of the iterative process why this briefing was brought forward.
I think my first question is in the letter that we have from Chief Thomas, which says, we've looked at your situation and want you to know that if you use or continue to use violence, you will be charged and prosecuted for your illegal acts, and which, to be clear, is being sent to people where we don't necessarily have probable cause that they've been involved in a crime. So it's a pretty intense letter, I would say, to get in the mail as a young person from the chief of police, which is who signed that. This also says in this letter that they're working, that groups like the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms and Explosive, FBI, and the DEA are part of the, what was then called the Denver Group Violence Reduction Strategy. So one thing I'm curious about is, was it a condition of the DOJ funding that we share this information with these federal partners?
No.
Okay, but we do that. They're part of the team.
Yeah, so
okay.
The GAIN, how it worked is there was a GAIN what we called the mothership meeting with about 6 city organizations and 6-7 law enforcement organizations. And the very beginning of each meeting is an overview of violent gun crime trends in the city. Maps, is it up, is it down? And a recap of candidates if we've been successful, unsuccessful, and sometimes a presentation on we're seeing group X and actively shooting at group Y. And the whole point of that is to develop a comprehensive approach with everyone, all law enforcement in Denver who can positively impact gun crime.
Okay, so it does involve those agencies. So here's the other major area of question that I have, because there's such a mismatch here between what I'm hearing that community groups were told about this program and then what we're being told today, and I do not understand the mismatch. Stefan, not to put you on the spot, but if you could come up to the mic, I want to understand. I think you were the one that conducted some of these community meetings, and so I just want to ask you directly. What we heard filtered back from those meetings was that the numbers of youth who were identified as potentially eligible were far higher than this 292. Can you give me some context for that, if you understand? I mean, in other words, were there numbers that you gave to community about how many youth were considered in some way? And if so, what were those, and what's the difference there?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
In the information sharing meeting that we had, it was a collaborative meeting where we had the DPD crime analysts, we had Megan Rohr, we had our leadership team, we had DPD Commander Herrera, we had Chief Sanchez. We had a number of different individuals there to answer questions and to articulate more about what this program is. I think it's important to note, and I don't say this to disparage, it's important to note that some of the voices that were screaming the loudest were not present in one of the 2 meetings that we had. Yeah, and so, so for clarification's sake, we personally, as a group, I can't speak to what KJ went over because I can only remember my portions of it, obviously. But I can't speak to any numbers that might have been shared in terms of total number of youth that were thrown in there. What I can speak to is the fact that the youth were a component that were added to the GAIN program after it was already going for a number of months. I believe if everything started in October, I don't think we added youth until March. Right. So it was one of those things where out of that 222 individuals, a gross majority of them were adults, right? Only a limited amount of them were juveniles. But what I will say is that certain people will use any numbers, any bits of information possible in order to further a narrative, kind of disparaging what it is that we're looking to do.
So can I understand from anyone at the table, was there any pool of youth that numbered more like in the thousands that were at some point subject to filtering? I'm really trying to match up what people think they heard on a community and just be accurate. And so, for example, was there a pool of youth that was larger than the 292 that we somehow started with or looked at or anything like that?
Can someone affirmatively respond? I'm seeing some head nodding, but.
I'm happy to jump in here. I have no idea where that number would have come from. The only connection I can make is the 222 is where your team has spent their time on it. It draws from a data model that is much larger than that, but there was no other screening done on any of the other folks that are in that data model other than the 222.
Okay, do we know how many are in the data model?
So in the data model, it's essentially just a rolling 3 years of all people involved in any crime.
Including as a victim, as a witness,
Right.
not necessarily a suspect. Right. How many people is that, though?
I'll have to get back to you. I don't know off the top of my head.
I'm just wondering if that may have been the number that was shared.
I think it's likely that that is the number that was shared and then misinterpreted as the number of people we were screening or looking to contact.
Okay, but that is the pool of people that that would be pulled out for data analysis and some, I mean, that is the starting pool. So I don't know that that's a misinterpretation exactly.
So I don't have the number in front of me of the whole entire 3 years worth of data, but I do have gun crime specific numbers. So about 7,500 people, adults and juveniles, have a gun crime score of any range.
Okay, and that's exactly what people are concerned about and said back to us. So there have been about 7,500 people assigned a gun crime score. That is accurate, and that is what people are concerned about and have said back to us. So I don't think we should be implying that community members are fabricating things. Okay, and I'm not saying anyone did that, but that number actually matches up exactly with what people thought they heard and is in fact the number of people who have been given a score. That's a lot of people.
So for some context, the analysts are not accessing an entire list at a time. They're running the data model and pulling 10 people out at a time, where they will then see if that pool of 10 can get them to the 3 to 5 that we're hoping to discuss in the mothership meeting.
Okay.
So at no point is there a list of thousands of people.
Got it. That's helpful to know. And I will happily tell people that to allay fears. How are the 10 pulled out with the highest scores?
Highest score.
Okay. What would a high score be?
I'll have to get back to you. I don't have that off the top of my head.
Councilmember, we have 4 other members in the queue.
That's fine. I can be done then. Thank you.
So I guess going back to one of the previous slides, we don't have to pull it up, but it was talking about the decrease in shootings that we've seen over the last couple of years, which is a positive thing. But then you did state that this was not attributed to this pilot, that the decrease in shootings was not attributed to this pilot. And so then that then leads me to the question of then, what is the need for the redesign or even moving forward with such a type of process or pilot if we did not actually see any significant impact? The data didn't give us anything, and also we have seen a decrease in shootings, maybe for a variety of other programs or things that are in place for folks. So why continue down this path? Why do a redesign?
I'd love to start, and then I'll hand it over to you. I mean, I think this year to date, and I may be a little dated on this, I think we've had 155 shootings to date. I think our goal is 0, right? And so while we've had a significant decrease in that, I think we're open to any tactic and any strategy that will get us to 0, because we don't think any family should have to go through that. And as Commander, I think we'll go into in a moment, we think it has to be a 3-pronged strategy that includes both people-based and place-based strategies in order to do that. And that's how it's been studied and put out in terms of proactive policing that really works in cities. And so we've had tremendous success, I think, from some of the tactics we've used thus far, but we don't think it's enough. We want to be at 0. And I think that's why we'll continue to look at this and see this design did not work for us in this way. That's why we've wound it down. But I think we've seen it really work in other cities and are looking for what is the Denver-specific approach that we can take that works with things that exist already, like community violence solutions, that allows us to get closer to that 0 number. But Commander, what would you add?
Yeah, so the evidence base or the efficacy of focused deterrence is really strong. So I equate it to a vaccine. We know vaccines work, but not every vaccine works. So we need to go back to the drawing board and figure out how we can launch. And this is, I think, with Dr. Monroe, like our 3rd bite at the apple for the city of Denver trying to stand up and establish a focused deterrence program. So to get to a city that has 0 shootings, you need a person-based strategy.
I guess to that point, then why wouldn't we look at the strategies that are working and improve upon those strategies and like work on the things that we know are working and make them better and do more of that? Do we know the things that are working or would attribute it to those decrease in shootings? Like, why wouldn't we do that assessment? If we're looking at data, we're evaluating programs, why not look at that?
We certainly are, and that's one of the reasons why we discontinued this pilot. So we know P&I is effective. We have the independent research base, and so we are trying desperately to expand P&I. There's just so much proof from other cities that programs like this work, that if you're going to get to a city with 0 shootings, you need to be throwing, the analogy, spaghetti at the wall. You need a whole variety of strategies. And there's only 3 law enforcement strategies that have risen to the level of a Campbell systematic review in terms of of the articles we provided. And so we know it works. Why can't it work here?
Yeah.
That's what we're trying to figure out.
And because I have to move forward, because I know there's a couple other people in the queue real quick. You know, throwing spaghetti at the wall, that's a concerning statement, I will just say, because we're talking about people's lives and we're talking about, I think, trauma that has now occurred in community because of these letters and the way that in which that they were written. You have a letter coming not only from the chief of police, but from your DA. And I will say that even the example letter that we received shows DA Beth McCann. When this pilot took place, we had DA John Walsh. So I'm hoping that that was a typo or an error, but that's like one like minor issue that, you know, also has significant impacts because if it is a legal type of document. Also the fact that people are being told, if you do not participate, this is being shared with the DA. That to me, I'm not an attorney, but it is concerning that it is potentially a violation of your constitutional rights to due process. If you haven't done anything wrong, if you're not being investigated for any crime, but you're being told that your information is going to be shared if you choose not to participate. And that is concerning. And so I guess what I would say going forward, whatever is being decided, I would highly, highly recommend looking at some of the things that are already taking place in programs. As I mentioned during our briefing, our collaborative management program, DCP, they actually, Denver Collaborative Partnership, they actually do these staffings with families for kids that are involved in truancy court, which is a precursor, right, to kids ending up in a higher level. So when we're talking about youth specifically, but it can also help adults in their life as well, where you're actually doing an assessment live and finding out what are the services, what are the needs of this family, rather than sending a letter and saying, you participate, but if you don't, this is what's going to happen. And this is what can happen. And so I think it's a matter of really reevaluating and looking at what currently exists, what is in the future coming down with like community-led safety, public safety grants. Because I don't know that, to me, this is very much based in driving fear for people. And we've seen in a variety of spaces that doesn't always give us the outcomes that we want. And to the point that, oh, this is evidence-based and all of this, I still need to do more research on what that is, what that evidence-based is, and I want to see the documentation on that. Because I have great concerns that and I said this in our briefing, something from the 90s, when we were calling kids super predators, when we had over-incarceration of our young people, that we're using a model from the 90s. I find that just very concerning. And I want to continue to dig in more. I want to learn more about where you all are at and how you're engaging with community in a more proactive way, rather than we're going to do this thing and we're going to have all these law enforcement people looking at your information and then we're going to send out this letter to people. There's just a lot there, and I would love to continue that conversation. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilmember Gonzalez.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for all this information. I have, I know we're probably going to go over on time, but I have a question to Ben, Dr. Sanders, and everyone else. I mean, as I'm looking over who participated, I don't see the Office of Children's Affairs on slide 12, support and outreach. Was the Office of Children's Affairs part of this?
Preston was there.
Yeah, the position tied to youth violence prevention, Council President, was involved in this and gain when we got to the kind of 3 months end point where we incorporated youth, right? So not from the very beginning, but once we started to try to consider how we could also offer some of these services to young people, we did engage with the Office of Children Affairs and that youth violence prevention position.
So since COVID in Northwest Denver, we have a side community collaborative meeting. It's once a month. Do you know, was this pilot program shared with that group? Because it's a lot of the nonprofit and community partners that would hopefully have made this successful.
That's a good question. I would need to sort of look back at our records in terms of who was invited to the mothership meeting. I couldn't answer that off the top of my head. So I'd have to get back to you on that.
Okay. And then do you know if you all utilized, it says support and outreach here for Denver Public Schools. Do you know, did this ever come to the city school coordinating committee that we have established in our Denver Revised Municipal Code that meets?
I don't believe we ever went before that body, no.
So I think that a lot of times, maybe some of the, in my opinion, of having grown up in the summer of violence in Denver, when I lost a lot of friends in high school to gun violence, I've said this publicly, I went to more funerals in high school than I have as an adult from gun violence. I lost 5 friends in high school from gun violence. At North High School, one was shot and killed on the corner of 32nd and Clay, and one was shot and killed on in the middle of Federal on 32nd and Federal. What was successful, what helped during that time was the involvement of community. And when I see this pilot program and slide 12, I just don't see community listed. I have a community outreach group that has been meeting in Northwest Denver since COVID, and I don't think they were involved. I also know this woman named June from DPS. She has had a youth violence prevention working group that my staff, Alessandra, has attended. I don't remember, I was looking over her notes during the presentation. I don't remember you guys reaching out to that group. So, and my one last question is, did you come and brief City Council when this started, or is this our first briefing?
We did a briefing on November 20th, 2024 of the 3-pronged strategies, of which we talked about GAIN.
And did you ask for our help? Did you ask for our involvement, or did we just get briefed and talked to? Or did you say, hey, is there any way that you all can, your communities, you were all individually elected in your communities, you have registered neighborhood organizations, you're very involved in your communities. Did you ask us how we could help, and was there a council liaison during any of this program?
I don't remember ever asking council specifically for help.
And I think, Council President, this is an area of opportunity we absolutely see in 2026 for, as we're doing the redesign, what does communication look like, both with community partners, with council, with others that are involved. We recognize this, especially as we saw in the findings here around ONS's reputational risk and how do we discuss this. I mean, one of the things that's been talked about largely here today is its effect on youth, which absolutely those concerns and frustrations are deeply valid. And of the 12 folks that, the 12 youth that were contacted, 10 of them already had a relationship with ONS and their programs, and largely were contacted through that. But we didn't, I think there's opportunity for us to explain that better, right? And so I do think looking at 2026, as we take a pause and go forward, better communication, earlier communication is an opportunity we have here.
Thank you. I would just emphasize not just communication, I would say partnership. I have mentioned this numerous times with Mayor Johnston. The key to success is partnership. Not having a city council liaison, not having city council involved is, there's 13 of us that are actively involved in our community, 13 of us who are actively involved in projects in our community, and to not ask us for help is a missed opportunity. I could have told you of several different entry points in Northwest Denver. I could have given you names of entry points in Northwest Denver. I could have given you my lived experience of being involved in major gun violence in my life. And I feel like oftentimes, I'm going to say this again, it's really hard to create partnerships when you're talked to instead of brought in. For me, I'll say I statements. Collaboration looks like having city council at the table with us on all of these processes. all you have to do is come to me as council president and say, hey, can you give me a liaison to this process? Community planning and development does it. I have 2 members who are at the table right now who are involved in a redesign of looking at our single-family zoning in Denver. We have a city school coordinating committee that I worked on with Councilwoman Gonzalez Gutierrez that you could have leaned on. But if you don't ask us on our side, what it sets us up to is to react. And I think in 2026, as we look to figure out how to create better partnerships, setting us up to not react, setting us up to understand how we are subject matter experts in our neighborhoods, subject matter experts in these areas. You have a partner, Councilwoman Gonzalez Gutierrez, who is literally a subject matter expert in this area. And for her not to have been involved, for her not to have been incorporated is just not using, I always say, I'll say it a different way. I always tell my staff, have you exhausted every resource to get this done for the residents of Denver that pay our salaries? And I just don't feel like this pilot exhausted every resource by not incorporating the 13 of us and the subject matter experts that we have on city council. And we have a lot of passionate subject matter experts. So I hope that as you redesign this pilot program, that you proactively reach out to the council president to say who amongst you is interested in this and how can we get your feedback to make sure this is successful. I know Councilwoman Torres has dealt with this since COVID. I know all of us have. So thank you for this presentation. And I really, really, really hope in 2026 that we are not talked to, that we are incorporated, and that we were at the table, and that because this is our community as well. We are elected officials that have to go to baseball games, football games, soccer games, lacrosse games, our grocery stores, our registered neighborhood organizations, our happy hours that our community has. And we know our community and we are an asset. And if you don't utilize it, it's just, once again, you're briefing us and we're not part of it. So I understand the failures of this. I can see the data written on there, and I really hope and the Department of Safety that you can just look at this and say, so when you're reevaluating things, just don't forget about City Council. Please utilize us. We want to be partners and we want to be at the table with you because these are our people. They're our community. They're literally paying our salaries. So we want this to be successful. So just please utilize us and utilize the council president to figure out how we can be partners.